Hello and welcome to Beebe Book Buzz. This is the monthly show where your Beebe librarians join together to talk about the books that we've been reading recently that we think you might like in order to help you find your next great read. My name is Karen Stern and I am from the Reference Desk, and I'm here with Bridget Black, who is also from the Reference Desk, and with our Assistant Director, Jackie Powers. We have, as usual, quite a variety today, and I think Jackie is going to start us off.
Sure. I actually have my book. I almost never have it with me, but this one was on the shelf, so I brought it. This was Lisa C's latest, The Island of Sea Women. If you've read her before, she always has it's always an Asian country. I mean, it's Japan, it's China, Korea. This time it's Korea. Her books are, I think a lot of people just see them as women's fiction, but they're more than that. They're really, really well researched.
Very well researched, yeah.
There's often it's either in a different place or, the last one, the Tea Girl of Hummingbird Lane, was a lot about tea, and it was really, I thought, quite educational. So this one was not different. I would say this was I would argue possibly her most difficult book content-wise in terms of the subject matter. Really, it's hard to read. It's very kind of wrenching at times.
Right.
But so it's about Young Suk, and it covers her entire life. It's all of her books tend to be these kind of like sagas.
And where's this one set?
This one's Korea.
Korea.
It's an island in Korea, Jeju, which was sort of ended up as this kind of in-between place for. In the middle of a lot of wars. So it opens in the 20s, I believe. 20s. So when Korea is under Japanese control. And so I think there are, Japanese colonialists on the island, soldiers and stuff. And then it takes them through World War II. It takes you through the Korean War, and that's actually when it gets really hard. But the focus is actually on this island and what the women on this island do, and it's really, really interesting and historically accurate. The women, the society is in some ways really traditional. Like, you want a son, and everybody puts all their efforts into the sons and making sure they're successful. But the women are really in control. They're the breadwinners. Most of the women on the island are called. I'm not gonna pronounce this correctly, but it's Hanyeo. It's Haenyo, and they're basically these women who go into the sea and free dive. They dive and they get octopus and like abalone and like all these.
Wow.
And that's how they feed their families, and they sell it, and that's how they have money. And it's really, really hard. And the book alternates between present day Young Suk, so she's like in her 80s, I think. It's 2015 in the book, and back to the beginning. And so what they're doing is unbelievable. I mean, it's incredible. They're diving in this freezing cold water. They're staying in there for 45 minutes to an hour at a stretch. I mean, it's crazy what they're doing, and it's unbelievably dangerous. There's a scene in the present time when she's with a doctor, and the doctor's like, what you guys were doing was not okay. It was like all kinds of wrong. Like, they were practically hyperventilating. They would, come to the surface and there was all this breathing, basically the opposite of what you're supposed to do when you're diving.
Diving deep.
But they did it, and that's all they knew, and it's kind of one of these things that's dying out. But it was a really well researched. The characters are very, very interesting. It's about her and her friend. It's kind of the trajectory of their friendship, from when they're really young girls to when they're old and dead and gone, and their families and everything that happens to their families throughout the war. And you get this kind of historical perspective about this part of Korea during the Korean War. And I don't know about you, but I didn't know much about the Korean War and sort of how that rolled out. It was terrible. Really terrible, particularly on this island, and just what the people survived is incredible. But I would highly recommend it. I think it was not my favorite one of her books. I think the last one, The Tea Girl, was probably up there with my favorite.
The Tea Girl was fantastic.
It was just beautiful.
It was a beautiful, but it seems like it has a whole lot of the same kinds of elements to it. There's a historical element.
Yes.
I mean, it doesn't go quite back as far as yours, but Yeah, and then
No, but
the
it feels
personal-
like it, doesn't it? 'Cause
Right.
that part of China at the, in the, what was it, the 80s?
Oh, it starts in the 80s, so it's not that far
so it's not
back.
really that far back, but
it feels so much changed in China from, especially for the ethnic,
In that particular,
the ethnic
yeah.
minorities in China between the 80s and now. And that's, so you feel like you're going through history.
This whole, yeah.
And again, very well researched, and you learn about both the ethnic minorities and their cultures and the tea that is so important
Right.
and became really important worldwide in that time as well. So.
Right, and that's exactly, like, you get the history of the sort of the island, the history of this culture, this kind of matriarchal society where like they really were running the show. And
Exactly, it's the
I mean,
same.
the husbands were, it was so interesting. I mean, the husbands literally all just sat around a tree with the toddlers and like the babies all day. Like that was their job. They didn't work. They didn't farm. They didn't.
Right.
It was very strange. And I mean, the goal was to have sons that you could then educate. But the ones who weren't, I mean, this was the husbands kind of just cared for the children and everything. I mean, it was a hard life, obviously. But that was all they knew, and they loved it. And so I would still recommend it. Like I said, it wasn't exactly my favorite. I think because some of the content is very hard to read. Like the visuals that you're left with are just
Right.
things you can't quite get out of your mind for a little while. But worth it. But worth the read. And
Right.
if people like her, or if they haven't read her, I strongly recommend her as a writer. She's just does an incredible job of kind of mixing that history and cultural background into a really good, usually really good story too.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I think this sounds like something. If you have read her before, maybe try this one for sure. If you haven't read her before, maybe start with the Tea Girl.
I would start with a different one.
Yeah. I think of all the ones I've talked to people about, the Tea Girl is consistently the one that
I feel like she really hit it
she
all.
nailed it, yeah.
All of her other books I've enjoyed. I think there was only one I really didn't like, and I think it was her first one. But Snowflower and the Secret Fan, I think for a long time was her most popular, which I liked.
Right.
I liked, but
I've heard mixed opinions on that one too. Whereas the
Yeah.
Tea Girl is a home run
Consistent.
for pretty much everybody. Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
that was Lisa C., The Island of Sea Women.
That sounds amazing.
Yeah.
And a lovely cover.
It is a beautiful cover. Makes you want to be down there.
Be in the ocean.
Bridget, what do you have
All
for
right,
us
so
today? Something different. as
something
always.
different. We're changing pace. I read Charlie Jane Anders' The City in the Middle of the Night. This is a far future of humanity story. So it's sci-fi. It is set on a planet that the inhabitants call January. It is a tidally locked planet so that means that one half of the planet always looks at the sun and the other half always faces away from the sun. So one side is blazing hot and one side is frozen. And humans come to this planet to live, and they live in what's called the terminal zone, which is around sort of the equator, right between sun, day and night.
Right.
It starts in a city, but that is not the city in the middle of the night. And we go to a second city, also not the city in the middle of the night, because it turns out that there were creatures that already lived on this planet, and they've built the city in the middle of the night because they live on the night side of the planet, deep underground. They've adapted to survive. A lot of this book is sort of what it takes to be human in so far removed from humanity. It's presented as two first-person accounts of people who don't know each other at the beginning of the book but come to meet each other. It's also presented as sort of a historical document of what is a significant event in future human history. And it's a lot about what makes us human, what drives connections, and also what does it mean to live without a history or with a history. Because one of the things that you discover through the book is what it took to get to this planet and what that meant for cultures from our planet, from Earth, that have sort of been extrapolated out that don't exist anymore, and what that means and who people are.
Sounds wildly different.
Yeah,
It's really different.
It's really different. It's also goes into like biological changes and differences in that way.
So it's almost evolutionary.
Yeah, like evolutionary. I would say like if you have read Octavia Butler's like her books that are about that, I'm not gonna be able to.
I just
come up
blanked on it too.
Yeah, I can't remember. Like I can't come up with the names.
It's not Kindred, it's the other one.
Yeah, not Kindred. The other ones that are in space with it kind of has an element like that.
Right.
It also, in the way that it's sort of presented as a historical event that has already happened, it's sort of similar to like Atwood's The Handmaid's Tale, and also that it's depicting very, like, it is concerned with like what societies are and how societies exist. It's a wild book in a lot of ways. I do recommend it. I think that I do really think that if you enjoy sci-fi that either is character-based or hard sci-fi, you'll probably find something to like in this.
So the characters are strong in
yes,
this.
it's very well-developed characters.
Who are the two main characters?
Oh, you should say that. So the main character, the first character that we meet is a girl named Sophie, who is from the first city we go to, which is called Zeophont, where time is extremely, because there's no day or night, they've highly regulated what time means in this society. So everyone has to sleep at the same time and everyone is awake at the same time. And there are all of these intense, it's like very regulated city. It's very intense in that. And she's the main character. Early on in the book, what happens, the actual precipitating event, I should maybe explain that, is she gets caught breaking a law and is sentenced basically to be exiled from the city and thrown over into the night, which is a death sentence, an immediate death sentence.
Right.
But what happens is instead she meets one of the original inhabitants of this planet, which humans call crocodiles, and she comes to know as an intelligent species that communicate telepathically.
Oh.
Wow.
And she,
This is wild.
yeah, so and it brings her back to the city where she basically goes underground, but still like has this tie to them throughout the whole.
So does the crocodile write one of the documents?
No.
You don't have to explain. It's okay.
It's hard to explain. That sort of is that she becomes very connected to them.
Right.
This is where I wanted to not get into the plot because I think like exploring the plot is really a good thing about it. But the other document is written by a character named Mouth, who grew up as like in a band of traveling humans that traveled between the cities, and now is a courier, now is a smuggler. And she's come to this city. They meet. Eventually, Sophie travels with Mouth to another city on the planet, like I said, not the city in the middle of the night, where they have decided that time means absolutely nothing and everyone can do whatever they want always.
Now I see how this is like setting up to be this sort of almost anthropological study of how humans do things.
How humans live. So it's like hard, it's both hard to explain because part of the joy of reading it is to like follow these threads and to explore also like the human history before we got to January and how did it happen and what happened there and sort of and eventually the world of the crocodiles also too is something that we explore. So it's a wild book. It has a lot going on. And I do think if you like ideas, it's a good.
Right.
Does it have like I don't read a lot of sci-fi, but the Martian, Andy Weir's The Martian, had a lot of kind of science in it. I mean, you mentioned there were biological changes. Did they get into that from like a scientific perspective, or is it kind of just this is what happened? We don't really.
It's kind of just this is what happens. They don't explain it. It's not partially because Sophie and Mouth don't have the knowledge of what it is.
Okay, and you're hearing it from there. Right?
And you're experiencing from their perspective. And so they don't really know how it works. So it just happens.
Right.
And an interesting thing is obviously humanity like built a ship to travel and make interstellar travel to go to this planet. But since living on the planet, they've actually kind of gone backwards in technologically,
Right.
because they don't have contact to the mothership, which is still in orbit around the planet, but they can't contact it.
Right.
And they don't have the technology that brought them there. So there's no way for humans to
So
go forward.
So again, they're sort of starting over, and you get to see how they develop, right?
Yeah.
So it's philosophically pretty interesting, as well as from a character point of view.
How to envision an entirely new society.
Yeah.
Because that's sort of where we're sort of going. In
Starting
here.
over.
Sort of reminds me of the Queen of the Tierling, because that was the same. I mean, they were in this society that was sort of Handmaid's Tale-ish, and it was, the technology was there, and then they go take those ships and they go back.
In time.
In time,
They actually go in time. Yeah, that's
They
a
do
time.
go back, yeah.
That's a time. Well, it's time and space, that one. But anyway, yeah. And they also come from a crumbling world. I don't know where these people came from, but
Well, and I mean, the Earth that they left behind seems to have been pretty much,
obliterated.
yeah, like this was the last great hope for humanity, is
Right.
to travel to another planet.
Right.
But there seems to have also been a lot of things that happened on the ship that, for various reasons, characters don't know or don't want to talk about.
Right. Right.
Because they don't want to talk about and it's a lot about the weight of history, even when people don't want to acknowledge history.
Right. Right. So is
Unbelievably
this
thought-provoking.
is this something that's going to continue in some way?
I think there are a lot of other stories you could tell in this world. I don't know that there's necessarily a sequel. I do think that it doesn't have a fully conclusive ending. So I would say if you really like completely wrapped up endings, it's probably not the book for you. But if you can handle a fair amount of ambiguity, and I think that because it's posited as a historical document, you can kind of assume what happened. But if you want the answer spelled out, it's not there.
Okay. So good to know that for those
certainly
of us
different.
who like, yes, very different
Yeah.
from.
It's pretty wild, I will say. It's very different from these other books.
Yeah, well, and certainly different from this one. Although my author recommended your author's book
It's true.
on the back.
It's right on the cover.
And my author is Andrew Sean Greer, and again, wildly different from both of these books. The book is Less. And I keep wanting to talk about this book as like this kind of sleeper that, is
but it won
come
the
from
Pulitzer,
behind and everything. And it has that kind of, it's kind of a rom-com, and it's kind of witty and wry, and there wasn't a whole lot of hoopla when it came out. And then it's like, oh, but it won the Pulitzer. So, so it's not really a sleeper, but it kind of, it's not the most talked about book on the
it's
planet
still,
or
yeah.
anything. But it is gorgeously written and really beautifully observed. And I'll just give you the premise of the book is our hero, Arthur Less, and this is a very apt picture of him. He's a sort of not very well-known author whose main claim to fame, besides a reasonable success in his book, is having been the long-term partner of a major poet. His current lover, Freddie, who Arthur is constantly warning not to get too attached to him, takes him at his word and leaves him and goes and marries someone else. Arthur's latest book isn't doing very well with the publishers. And added to all that, he's about to turn 50, and he's pretty sure he's the only gay man on earth who's ever been about to turn 50 or aged in any way or anything. It's not a good time for him. So what do you do with this big birthday approaching and this wedding invitation from your ex-lover in your hand? Arthur's answer is to run. So he takes off. He goes through his drawers and he finds all of the invitations that mid-level authors get to like second-rate conferences and interviews and teaching gigs and prize ceremonies. And he cobbles together this year-long trip, globe hopping from gig to gig around the world so that he doesn't have to go to the wedding. And on the way, he's going to turn 50. So he basically also accepts a friend of a friend's 50th birthday, which happens to be right at the same time as his, like a couple days away from his. So, this kind of tells you a lot about Arthur Less. Like, he doesn't even really believe in himself enough to kind of believe that he deserves his own 50th birthday, so he sort of tags along at someone else's 50th, which happens to be in Morocco, in the desert in Morocco. And so you get this sort of this feeling of a travelogue as well as a rom-com, right? It's like he's going, each chapter is called like less Mexico, less Italian, less German, less Moroccan, you know, so, or less Morocco, I think. So you're getting, each chapter is a different place in the world that he's traveling to. So yeah, he's a little bit of a sad character in certain ways, and I want to just give you a little taste of his voice. So to set the scene, he's leaving the States now, going to Mexico, which is his first stop on the trip, and it's nighttime and there's some turbulence on the plane. Arthur Less has heard it is traditional in Latin American countries to applaud an airplane's safe arrival. In his mind, he associates it with the miracles of Our Lady of Guadalupe, and indeed, while the plane suffers a prolonged bout of turbulence, Less finds himself searching for an appropriate prayer. He was, however, raised Unitarian. He has only Joan Baez to turn to, and Diamonds and Rust gives no solace. On and on, the plane convulses in the moonlight, like a man turning into a werewolf. And yet, Arthur Less appreciates life's corny metaphors. A transformation, yes. Arthur Less, leaving America at last, perhaps beyond its borders, he will change like the aged crone who is rescued by a knight and who, once she is carried across the river, becomes a princess. Not Arthur Less the nobody, but Arthur Less the distinguished featured speaker at this conference. Or was it a princess into a crone? So you can kind of hear, you know, you might think that this book about kind of slightly depressed guy is going to be slightly depressing, but it's not. You can hear from the tone of that it's a lighter tone. It has, I love that phrase, on and on the plane convulses in the moonlight like a man turning into a werewolf. And he has a lot of really sort of beautiful turns of phrase in there. And then there's that kind of wry humor, that kind of understated, slightly self-deprecating tone to the thing. And at times there are scenes when it's really laugh out loud funny. Sometimes it's almost slapsticky, which I don't necessarily always go for, but it made me laugh. So he kind of keeps us interested with these stories within the bigger arc of Arthur's, you know, process of what he's going to do with his life and his love stories. And you know, you get each chapter, he has love interests, he has some unexpected wins, there are silly misunderstandings, there are outright disasters, and guess what? You know, because it's a romantic comedy, our hero is going to land in a happy place, and he does. And so that's, if for those opposite of yours, those of you who like the happy ending, this is a book for you. I think the real beauty of the book is that he's just this sort of, I mean, yeah, he's bumbling, but he's kind of completely relatable. He's like, his story is our story, maybe kind of magnified a little bit. It's the story of how most of us feel like we're kind of bumbling through. We've got a lot of those kind of mid-level successes and a few spectacular failures, but basically we're all just going along trying to believe in ourselves, and that's kind of the beauty of Arthur Less. And you come to know him as he comes to know himself. So that's the arc of the book, really.
Do you think it merited the Pulitzer?
Well, it's a good question.
Because it doesn't seem like the usual.
It certainly is not the weighty tone that you expect a Pulitzer to be. And I certainly think, I mean, I don't know. No, I mean, it surprised me a little bit that it won the Pulitzer. But at the same time, the writing is,
I really enjoyed the writing.
The writing is amazing.
Didn't finish it, but it was not the book's fault. It was mine.
Right.
But I really did. It was witty. I liked the tone. It was very kind of succinct, but he did have a lot of those like visual.
Oh yeah, it's you can really picture Arthur Less, and this is his blue suit that he wears to everything, and he had made once for him somewhere in East Asia, yes, and it has, you know, the lining, and he's very proud of it, and something happens to it at some point. But anyway, you can see him. You understand his insecurities, and like I said, the insecurities are kind of magnified, and I can imagine people getting, you know, thinking, this guy's just a wuss. But if you see beyond that, you recognize that he's actually a good guy. He's just, you know,
Does it want you to identify with, I was trying to, like, people who don't like awkward situations? Will it make you feel awkward while you're reading it? Will you feel awkward for him, or?
No, it wasn't a cringy book. Like, I'm terrible in those situations. When I see, like, I can't watch certain TV shows where they're like overly awkward. I get so upset for people that I can't even continue. And that's not this at all. He walks, and again, the writing is very skillful, and I think that's partly why he won the Pulitzer. It also has an old school feel to it, even though it's
it's obviously a very modern story.
It's a very modern story, but it has this feeling to it that is a little bit like,
it's almost like he feels old.
Well, he's
from
old
another
school.
time.
I think the author might as well. I have this feeling that there's a lot of the author, obviously, in maybe I shouldn't say that, but I do feel that, Anyway, I think it's absolutely worth a read. I read it over vacation, and it was a great vacation read because it's kind of, it has enough weight to it that it keeps you there, but it's also, it's not too heavy, and you find yourself thinking about Arthur Less and what he might be doing when you're not reading the book. So,
Oh, fun.
it's a good one. All right, we have a few more minutes. Does anybody? Oh, you had another one, didn't you, Bridget? Do you want to tell us about?
I could say really quickly, if you're looking for, if you like me have a reading goal and you want to go faster, you want to up those stats, maybe you want to read a graphic novel.
How many books are you trying to read this year?
I'm trying to read 75. So I'm going to have to read a few more graphic novels to really get there. But this is a good one, Man-Eaters by Chelsea Kane. It is about teenage girls who, when they get their periods, they turn into giant cats.
Oh, okay. I've heard about that one.
They turn into giant man-eating cats. So
wow, all right.
You might feel that way. It has really nice, the art is really nice. It has sort of these old school, like the covers are these kind of like old school ads and cats.
We can put some of those up on the screen.
Yeah, and you can see sort of what they are.
Great.
But it's fun. It's short. It's ongoing.
Is it funny, or is it more?
It's more serious.
Right.
It's more serious. It's fairly short. It is still ongoing, so it doesn't conclude.
Oh, it's a series.
It's a series.
Okay.
But
Oh, interesting.
All right. So is it kind of Alderman, like The Power, this sort of idea that girls can take over?
That's kind of what it is,
Right.
because that's while you go through, that's sort of what happens.
Right. Right. And what's on everybody's to-read list? Anything that you're hoping to read this coming?
I feel like there's some nonfiction coming out. I like Adam Gopnik, who I've talked about. I know I talked about his last book on this show. It was I can't remember what the name is.
It was the one about New York. No,
It was at the Stranger's Gate. I can't remember. It was a while. It was a while ago. I think it was last year at this time. But his new one, I can't think of the title. I think it's about something about being a liberal or something.
Okay.
I really enjoy, I actually listen to his books. Something about the way he reads them, I've read them and I've also listened, and I always enjoy listening more. I don't know, I just feel like he adds something
he's
to it.
He's a radio personality too, isn't he?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, I thought I'm thinking he writes for the New York Times. That's what I'm
He's
thinking
written for
lots of
everybody.
people. Yeah.
But I just something about the way he reads.
So you'll be
gives
listening
it
to Adam
personality.
Gopnik's new
Yes,
one,
I will have to go back and buy the audio. Library.
And
also on nonfiction, I am really looking forward to reading Say Nothing by, I want to say Patrick O'Keefe. He's a New Yorker writer. It's about a murder that took place during the Troubles, the highest period of the Troubles, and it has a local connection because some of the information that came out of it because of a Boston College oral history project.
The woman, the mother.
The mother, yes.
Yes, I read about this in the Globe. It's a really strange story.
Yes, it's somewhat.
it's kind of true crime meets.
It's true.
Yeah, and it is true crime.
Meets-
He apparently discovered an unnamed person who had committed the murder, who had not been named in any other source. He names as one of the actual committers of the crime.
Right, and this is someone famous.
They are not
quite
famous, but it is connected to Jerry Adams, who was leader of Sinn Féin for many years.
So it's time that we wrap up, and we will be here again next month to welcome you back to another edition of Beebe Book Buzz. And until then, we will. This is the library signing off.